This happened 2 years ago, back when I was living in an all-woman dormitory. It was a bit of a nightmare. I hated having to share all my space and time with others at first, but I managed to get kind of used to it. There was a shower on the first floor. No bathtub, just a communal shower. There were 2 showers actually, but if you used the shower facing the door to the corridor, then everyone who walked in would see all of you. Most of the others in the dorm felt the same way about that shower. They hated it. No matter how much you tried to make the curtain hang in the right place, there was always a gap. With the other shower, there was a little more privacy since it was around a corner. If people heard the water running when they came in, they would know that you're in the shower around the corner. Hope that makes sense. 1 good shower, 1 bad shower. Actually, we affectionately called it the bad shower. I guess there was something more to that shower. We all just didn't like it, and I had a friend in my dorm who said she had the ability to sense the presence of spirits. You know, the 6th sense. Anyways, this friend of mine says that there's a kind of black mist, or something like a fog, that materialized in the shower cubicle one day, and that kind of spooked me out. One summer night, I woke up and headed to the bathroom. I don't know what time it was. All I know is that it was dark and everyone else was probably asleep. I used the bathroom, and as I was heading back towards the corridor, I heard something bang inside the bad shower. The sound was deafening. There was a kind of unwritten rule about slamming doors at night. It woke everybody up, and I didn't want everyone to think it was me there. I turned and froze in place. I was surprised because I thought that I was the only one up. I was sure that there was no one else in the bathroom area with me. I remember my first thought after that being, something's wrong. I started to speedwalk back to my room. I didn't like the situation. I felt as if I wasn't alone in the corridor. It sent my heart racing. I sensed that there was something behind me, some kind of presence. I knew something was behind me, but I didn't have the courage to look back and confirm it. I intuitively knew that it was what my friend had seen. The black mist. I heard my mind continue to repeat, "It's that thing from the bad shower," again and again. I felt the chill of something right at my heels. I felt its icy cold presence at my neck. And most disturbingly, I felt the distance shorten between me and it. I couldn't keep it together any longer. I broke into a sprint and raced back to my room. I slammed my door shut. I didn't care about the rules. I locked the thumb lock and crawled into my bed. Whatever that black mist thing was, and I'm sure it was that because not only did I sense it, but I saw it in my peripheral vision. It didn't seem to be able to enter my room. I felt as if something was outside my door though, something that was waiting. I don't know how to describe it, but maybe it was a sense of impatience that I saw, with the shadows passing back and forth in the gap under the door, or maybe it was the sensor light in the corridor which detected light. That seemed to stay on far too long that night. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I don't think it was. I think that there was something out there. I felt a gaze. We had a little window in our doors, which was covered by a small curtain. It was like a small box-shaped window. Anyway, through a gap where the curtain didn't align against the frame of the window, I felt that gaze. There was something out there in the corridor, and nothing on earth will convince me otherwise. I was so terrified by it all, I ended up putting the pillow over my face and the duvet. Before I knew it, it was morning. I went down to breakfast as normal, and I made sure I took a seat next to my friend who had experienced the same black mist encounter that I had. I broached the subject and she said, "You know what? I went past the bad shower this morning and I felt as if something had been lifted. As if something had moved on, you know." I knew then that I had seen the same thing as her. I didn't see the black mist again after that. I wonder where it went and if it's still hanging around the dormitory. Thankfully, I've moved on. It was a horrible experience. I don't wish on anyone. This takes place at the end of January, and I had just finished a sweep of the mountain and was on my way back down to close the main gate. A strong northerly wind blew the powdery snow down below to the left of the valley. It looked like a miniature snowstorm. It was interesting, so I stopped and watched it from my vantage point. I noticed something close to that snowstorm, the figure of a person. It was standing there, watching the snowstorm too. Since it was getting late and cold, I went down to speak with them. I drew closer to the figure, and as I did, I heard that whoever was out there was talking. It sounded like someone was having a conversation. The person's voice was only audible during the pauses of the wind's relentless howling. The figure was speaking to someone, I'm sure of it. The only issue was I couldn't see who it was speaking to. I wondered if someone was hurt or lost. I got a little concerned. As I got closer, I discovered that I recognized the person. The snow and lack of light had been obscuring my view. I knew that guy. He lived on my street. We used to be good friends at school. I called out to him, "Hey, what the hell are you doing out here?" When I called out to him, he slowly turned to face me. He had a very sober and stern look on his face. "Oh, hey, what are you talking about?" he replied to me. "What? Anyway, it looked like he was speaking to someone just then, by the way. I don't see anyone out here. Who are you speaking to?" "Oh, yeah, I was speaking to Stalker." "What?" I stood there stunned for a moment or two. I didn't expect him to say that. Stalker was his son. Sadly, his boy passed away. Childhood cancer. He died aged 7, just on the cusp of spring. The loss of his son hadn't taken a visible toll on him. In fact, that was the first time he mentioned his boy's name after the funeral. He didn't seem to have changed all that much after his son had passed, except he was very quiet to the point where he wouldn't say a thing. If we were ever at an event or a party, he would just sit somewhere off to the side and keep quiet with a sullen look on his face. That wasn't that different to how he was before his son passed. I never saw him grieve though. Even at Shotter's funeral, he kept silent. He was just watching his poor wife, bawling her eyes out. He looked up and appeared to glare at the attendees. He stared at us. He stared at us all, like we were his enemies. Seeing him like that, I guessed that he was struggling internally with his emotions, or at least he didn't want to show everyone how he was feeling. It could have been pride or shame. I'm guessing though, who am I to say how he was feeling? It just looked to me like he was suppressing it all, burying his pain, and it was 9 months after the funeral that I saw him out on my mountain range talking to the biting wind. "I was just out here for a walk. I really like it here. I heard a voice. I felt as if I was being called by someone. I turned to see who it was, and then I saw Stalker stood right there." I listened to the man. I didn't know what else I could do. The wind died down, and the whole mountain range fell eerily silent. It felt to me like time had stood still, like the mountains wanted to hear his story too. "Stalker. Do you know what he said to me?" He said, "Don't be mean to Mum." I knew that my friend could be mean. My wife had overheard him scolding his son before he passed. He apparently kept telling the boy, "Don't cry, nothing gets solved by crying." That should give you an idea of the person he is. Everyone knows everything in small towns. Word travels fast. "I know I can be horrible sometimes. I don't mean to be. I guess I can't help it sometimes." It sounded like he was truly contemplating the advice his son had given him from beyond the grave. I looked away, and then back, and Stalker was gone. He tilted his head back and stared skyward. He kept on talking, unusually loud for him. "It really worried me, to be pleaded with and to be preached to by my son. After I hadn't seen him in so long, I felt angry, and I felt pity. I feel a lot of things right now, and I also don't know how to feel." He kind of just trailed off, but continued to stare at the sky. Grief. What a terrible thing that is, eh? "You know me. I rarely cry, but look at me now. I wonder when these tears will stop flowing." Tears were cascading down his face, white puffs of exhalation plumed with every sob. The pain in that man's heart must have been unbearable. Before long, his cheeks were wet, Then the guy howled, literally from the pit of his stomach. It was as if it was all coming out of him. His tears were falling. I watched as they slipped silently down through the snow. And just off to the side of the spot I saw the tears, I saw 2 indentations in the powdered snow. One set of footprints, which undoubtedly could only belong to a child. Before long, a sharp gust signaled the return of the wind, and it began to whip up again, and the footprints were buried under the freshly blown snow. They were gone. They were gone physically, but I don't think he would ever forget them. They must be burned into his memories. We both descended the mountain as the sun waned, and when we got to the bottom, I saw him in the fluorescent light of the street lamps. I saw that stony, sullen expression had begun to lift. I didn't see that expression again after that. I always think back to that experience when the first snow of winter begins to lift and the ice begins to thaw. Just like the ice in his heart, I guess. This happened when I got into university. It was a uni in Tokyo. Rent was gonna kill me, but thankfully a relative stepped in at the 11th hour. He owned an apartment there. I was told that I could move in at any time and rent would be free. I was over the moon. I think I started living there in early March. It wasn't a perfect deal though. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was grateful, but it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. The apartment was in a very old building, and the rent was very cheap, and most of the residents weren't from Japan. It wasn't designed for students, is what I'm saying. So there I was, surrounded by various smells and language barriers. I felt like I didn't belong, you know? But my uncle assured me that it would be fine, and above all, rent was free. I mean, who am I to complain? By the way, I didn't hate being around non-native people. I mean, it's just something I have to point out for this experience. I decided to make a go of it there. In April, classes started. I made many friends, joined many clubs, and discovered drinking. It was a riot. Every day felt like a rush. It was fun. One night I came back to my apartment after the 3rd day of a 7-day binge. I was knackered, honestly, man. I kind of threw my hand up at the door to unlock it and leant on the door to gain entrance. I was really tired. I felt a sudden strange feeling of being out of place. As I pushed the door open, it revealed a surprising sight. There was a woman sat at the table. She had long dark hair. She looked to be Filipino. "Oh, I'm really sorry, I must have got the wrong apartment," I blurted out as I closed the door. That was really weird and embarrassing as hell. Even though I was pretty drunk, something didn't seem right. I guess mistaking the apartment is easily done, but why the hell did my key work in someone else's door? That's pretty disturbing. I looked at the door number, looked at the photos I had taken on my phone of my address, and it matched up. Something was very wrong here. I felt as if I had suddenly sobered up. Was there someone in my apartment? I put the key in the lock and I slowly turned it. I fearfully pushed the door open, and through squinted eyes I saw the inside of my apartment. There was no one sat at the table when I opened the door now. Was I so drunk that I was seeing things? I guessed I was a little overtired. I was convinced the booze and lack of sleep was to blame. I fell asleep pretty easily that night. A few months went by and I had almost forgotten about what had happened that night, because nothing else happened. Until something weird happened. I want to tell you about it, but first I'll have to tell you about the apartment. It's kind of hard to explain, but the layout of my apartment went like this. When you walk through the door, you will see a door to the bathroom on the right and the kitchenette further along on the left. When you get down the hall, you will see a table in the main room. The walls are a standard grey colour and the windows have railings. I lived on the 2nd floor, and the window in the lounge area looked out onto the street below. That window is the window I want to tell you about. When the nights and days were brighter and summer had come to Tokyo, I started to hear a strange series of noises coming from the window at night. Those noises would always creep me the hell out when I was home alone at night. It would start up at around 1 or 2 a.m., and it was a dull, thudding kind of sound. It sounded like someone was banging on the walls. It didn't really follow a pattern, you know? It wasn't as if it was a certain day of the week or an exact time, but one thing it was regular. At first I thought that it could be someone or something hitting the window from outside. I checked it and it didn't look like someone could reach the window easily, and nothing was out there that could be blown by the wind to clatter into it. It was summer anyway, 40 degrees outside with crazy humidity. There was no breeze. I wondered what the hell the person next door was doing then. I couldn't think what else it could be. I felt bad to ask questions to people who can't understand what I'm asking completely. The sound wouldn't usually last longer than 5 minutes each time, so I decided that I could just live with it. One night, one of the lights in my room went out. Even when I changed the light bulb, the light wouldn't work. I wondered if there was an issue with the wiring. I headed into town the next day to ask about how I could get it repaired. I mean, I was living there for nothing. I might as well try to help a little with household repairs. I found a local handyman and I went into his store. I told him the issue and he smiled. He was really nice. But when I told him my address, the smile on his face disappeared. "Do you really live in that apartment?" I felt a little weirded out. Was something going on here? I asked him what he meant. According to the local repairman, a former resident took her life in that apartment. She was a migrant worker from the Philippines. Apparently the method was hanging, and she did it by the window. That was also how the body was discovered, by a passerby. Imagine that. My blood ran cold. Things started to make sense now. The woman I had seen that drunken night wasn't down to me going into someone else's apartment. I had potentially seen an apparition. The noises I was hearing at night as well, the dull thuds which lasted no longer than 5 minutes. Could those thuds be caused by her feet skittering against the window as she hung by her neck? The desperate kicks still resonating in that apartment at night, signaling her spirit was likely not at peace. I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I walked home in the scorching summer heat with my forehead covered in a cold sweat and chills throughout my body. I looked for another place, and until I got it sorted, I stayed with a friend. This happened last summer, and now the nights are getting lighter out, I'm reminded of the fear I experienced. I was in my second year at my company, my first job, and I wanted to live alone. There were girls I wanted to flirt with, and I couldn't be bringing them back to my parents' house. It would be my first time living alone, so I picked a place pretty close to work. I'm pretty slow in the mornings. I found a nice enough apartment, and the rent didn't seem that frightening, so I pulled the trigger. The move coincided nicely with my summer vacation. I had a couple of weeks off, and after the move I was in no hurry to get up early. I slept in. Every day that I was off work, I seemed to stay up later and get up later. I loved reading message boards online, especially 2chan. One night I was up late, it was about 2 a.m. I heard this terrifying noise. The doorknob of my front door started to turn. It sounded like someone tried the door handle. I'm not gonna lie, it scared the hell out of me. It's creepy enough if you get a knock at the door or someone goes for the doorbell at night, but when someone just outright grabs the door handle and tries it, that's a different level. I sat at my computer desk watching the doorknob for a few minutes in silence. It didn't turn again. That was it. I thought I'd better call it a night at that point. I thought about what happened. I wondered if it was a friend of mine or maybe a drunken neighbor mistaking my apartment for his. I guessed it was the latter. The next night I was once again up late, and the same thing happened again. Around 2 a.m., the doorknob violently turned. I had to do something, even though I was terrified. I tiptoed over to the door and put my eye to the peephole. However, when I looked out there, whoever was out there was already gone. The mysterious person who was trying my door handle continued to harass me for another 2 nights. On the 5th night, I invited my friend over to come drink with me. I was pretty stressed by it all, so having a friend over for some beers was exactly what I needed. He ended up bringing a friend too, so there was 3 of us drinking. We ran out of booze and snacks at around 2 a.m. Luckily for me, there was a 7-Eleven about 30 seconds away from my new place. I decided or forgot to lock the door, and I just headed off to the shop. I mean, my 2 friends were in there, so I thought it would be fine. I left my apartment, and a couple of seconds went by. I was in the hallway making sure I had my wallet on me and my phone, and suddenly my apartment door opened and then slammed shut. I instantly thought that whatever had been trying to get in had finally found its chance. I pushed thoughts of the paranormal aside and ran in to speak with my friends. I asked, "Did any of you just open the door?" They looked at me all puzzled, and my friend's friend replied, "Wasn't that you just opening the door just now?" To be honest, I was more than buzzed. I had a fair few beers on board, and that recent incident made me desire more. On the way to the store, I mulled things over in my head and decided that I might just be imagining things or making mountains out of molehills. I went back to my apartment with a new attitude. I felt like telling my friends about the spooky goings-on with the doorknob, and we had a heck of a laugh over it all. It really took the edge off of the situation, you know? When I tried to explain why I was scared, I ended up laughing. I could see how absurd I had been. My friend and his friend ripped on me, and I guess I deserved it a little. We got back to drinking and we stayed up late. It turned into a really good night in the end. Nothing spooky happened after that. I had always assumed that whatever that doorknob turning thing was paranormal. I don't know, maybe it was the images it conjured up in my head when I heard it so late. Also, I never saw the culprit, so I kind of thought, whoa, I'm dealing with an unknown here. The doorknob never turned while I was looking through the peephole, so I guessed that it could have been some kind of mischievous person in the neighborhood. Or a would-be home invader. These things are usually explainable. If it's human, you know, a stalker, a thief, or someone else, then that's just as scary as the paranormal for me. It wasn't as if the problem was solved. I will say one thing though. I didn't hear the doorknob turn at 2 a.m. the following night, or any night after that, for that matter. Instead, bad dreams came. I was suffering. The nightmares I was having were so real and frightening it was really affecting my day-to-day life. These nightmares were kind of abstract, so stay with me here. I dreamed of a woman who kind of manifested through the ventilation fan, like The Ring, you know, where she crawls out the TV. This one, she crawled out of the ventilation fan. She defied gravity. She could plant her feet and hands on the wall and crawl down. She twisted and turned like she was crab walking on the walls. It was hideous. I would see this nightmare roughly twice a week, and then it became 3 times a week. At one point, I was so distracted by it was all I could think about. When early autumn came around, I decided enough was enough. I needed to take a look at that fan, or at least replace it. I didn't want to do it after work though at night, so I waited for the weekend. And then I took apart the fan with my tools. I wanted it gone. It was dirty inside that fan. I mean, I expected that, but it was black with dirt in there. And then I found something that deeply disturbed me. There was something taped, with duct tape, in the back of the ventilation pipe. I ripped the aged, rough tape away, and I heard a plinking kind of sound. Something fell. Some object slid down the ventilation pipe as if it was a slide. 3 blackened molar teeth landed on my linoleum floor. I nearly fell off the chair I was stood on. The initial shock I felt gave way to depression, not just for myself, but somehow it felt secondhand, like it wasn't mine. I doubt I'm making any sense right now, but I might as well finish the story. Now, in most movies or works of fiction, the person in my shoes might be running to the temple or the shrine or the church or whatever to set things straight. They might even dig into the building's history and ask about former residents, but I didn't. I couldn't. It's just not who I am. I just threw the teeth I found in the burnable trash. I'm sure that's the same as a cremation, right? I mean, in Japan, you would just pay to get these things burned or to purify yourself and set the soul of the tormented at peace, but hey, the garbage gets burned, doesn't it? Sorry, there isn't much of an ending here. The only ending I can share is the ending of my nightmares. So whatever I did worked. For now, I guess. This only happened last summer.